If you think about a leader you've had the opportunity to work with in your past who was really, really good at what they did, what was that like? What were some of the traits that they had? Hello, and welcome to Mindfulness Voyage. My name is Ted Meissner. Good to see you. Glad you could be here today. And I hope at some point in your career you had the opportunity to work with a leader who made the right choice. Not always the most expedient choices, but the right ones. Ethical leadership is what that's about. And today we're going to talk with someone who's an expert in that and in fact teaches about ethical leadership. Our guest today is Karen Liebenguth. Karen, welcome. I'm so glad to see you again. Thank you so much for speaking with me today.
Thank you, Ted. I'm happy to be here.
So we're going to dive into our topic around ethical leadership in just a moment. But first, I'm kind of curious. I'm wondering if you'd give me a short version of how you first got involved with mindfulness. What was the draw? What was it that brought you into mindfulness?
The one liner would be my own suffering, my own suffering. And this goes back maybe 18 years ago when I was working 50 to 60 hours in a corporate job, not sleeping, feeling underconfident, anxious. And that was around the time when I turned towards coaching initially for myself. And I met someone on the coaching training course who was a meditator. And I found her fascinating, the way she spoke about how she benefited from meditation and getting to know her mind. And that was the start for me to look at my own mind and the possibility that I could actually change my mind. And then I started to meditate, and then I met Vidya Mala, who's the founder of the organization I trained with subsequently in 2015. And I thought I need to train so I could share mindfulness with many, many more people, hopefully. That's how it came about. And it was a wonderful fit also with my coaching work.
Yeah, it is. And thank you for sharing that. And you do say more about that on your website, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later on as well. But it sounds very familiar. I know that many of the people who are watching this or listening to this on different platforms, they've followed me for several years in the corporate world and may have some connection with that
Mm.
experience you share of the long work hours and how that has affected your state of heart, your state of mind.
Mm.
Let's talk a little bit about ethical leadership. I'm wondering if you could say a little bit about what that is and what some of the distinguishing characteristics of it are for people who might not have heard the term before.
Yeah, ethical leadership is about being aware of how we are in the world as leaders, and leaders in the sense of, in the broad sense of being our own good leader, self-leadership, how we are as a leader leading people in a community, in an organization, in a corporate organization, in any context really. And ethics in the sense of being aware of and having that knowledge that everything we do, whether it's the way we think, judge, analyze, compare, how we speak, so our communication, what we do, our actions, have consequences on ourselves, others, and the world. So that's ethics, and becoming more and more aware of how our actions are in line or not in line with our deepest values, what most matters to us. And when we are not, as we practice ethics and become more aware of how we are in the world and how our actions of thinking, speaking, behaving, acting have a consequence on ourselves and others and the world. As we practice that and we become more, we become more sensitive to that. So that's ethics. I tend not to speak about morality because it's so loaded. So I like ethics, and that goes right back to Aristotle, and he spoke about it in this very way that I've just talked about. And he understood ethics in that way.
Yeah, and I like the way you also describe leadership, that this is not just about the hierarchical organization. It's not just being at the top, it's leadership of yourself, your own mind, your own actions, your own thoughts, your own words. And those have influence and
Mm.
impact in the world, or consequences, might be another way to put that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And leadership, yeah, it starts with ourselves, really. If we are not our own best leader, that already has an impact immediately on the people around us at home, at work, in our community, in our friendships.
Now, you have a background in leadership in the corporate world, and I'm wondering if there were some things that you observed in that time that showed there was a gap and a need for an awareness of ethical leadership, for more awareness about those actions, those thoughts, those words, and how they were influencing others. What were some of the things that you observed to show that there was a need here?
Yeah, over the years, I've been working with more and more people in leadership position that has sort of arisen as I have been working with different people in the workplace and outside the workplace. And very often I have been brought in to help leaders perform better, to behave differently, to do more, if you like, to feel more confident, when really most leaders suffer from fear of failure, of not doing well, of not performing well. Really tragic in a way when you begin to understand what leaders actually come to us coaches with, which is deeply human. So very often in the workplace, particularly, leadership coaching is seen as, or wants to focus mainly on behavior and performance, which is sort of really the surface level and doesn't change very much. We have to look at our inner life, you mentioned mind and heart. I sometimes leave out the heart because I fear that it's seen as too sentimental. But because, of course, we are not rational beings, we are emotional beings. Yeah, body, mind, heart, that's part of the same, the body that we are, who we are. And what I saw that was missing in the workplace was the human dimension of what it means to be a leader, the inner life of a leader, to look at the inner dimension, the thinking, the beliefs, the views, the conditioned behavior, tendencies of a leader, anyone really, but particularly leaders. Their emotional life, often leaders still believe they mustn't show any emotions. They must be tough and strong and not show any weakness. It's still as alive as 100 years ago, longer, yeah, as long as we can think of corporate organizations. So this is what brought me to think something else is needed that helps leaders to turn inwards in a safe space and to look at themselves and to also understand how their inner relationship, how they are, how they relate to themselves, the attitude they bring to themselves, has an effect on the relationships they have with others. Their peers, their staff, the people in their networks and other organizations in the world. And that it's what's happening inside of us is deeply relational, human, and includes emotions, beliefs, fears, all of that.
And you described something very well, that there's this surface idea of a focus in many kinds of programs and trainings that's about just the behaviors, and that's missing all of the underlying personhood that leads to those, the the thoughts, the emotions, the full context of what's going on. And without taking a look at that, those behaviors are just going to revert back to what's underneath them anyway. So I'm wondering if you might say some about what are the beneficial outcomes of leading ethically? What are some of the things that might, for those who are perhaps not as convinced that there's benefit to this, what are
Yeah.
some of those benefits?
Yeah, you mentioned self-care earlier, looking after ourselves, caring for ourselves. So that is one benefit, because when we begin to become more aware of our emotional life, how we are feeling underneath the surface level, leaders might find that they have an undercurrent of anxiety, fear, sadness. So getting to know oneself and beginning to change one's attitude towards oneself with care and compassion, kindness, and to ask oneself some questions. What's needed? What do I need to change to feel more connected, confident, more grounded, calm? What needs to happen for me to regulate better, not to make difficult emotions go away, but to come into different relationship with oneself. Yeah, so emotional regulation is absolutely not to make difficult emotions like fear and anxiety, stress, overwhelm, despair go away, anger. It's to come into relationship with our emotional life, to understand ourselves better, so we can meet ourselves exactly there, like we would a friend. That's what people learn on this program that I offer. People understand, oh, I can come into a different relationship with myself. I can be less judgmental. I can be kinder. I can be more compassionate with myself, which is far from being sentimental or weak or whatever you might call that, or that's often how people judge themselves. So that's one big benefit: more self-awareness, greater self-care, because less self-judgment, and better relationships. So in my program, there's a lot about listening to each other, learning from each other, and hence deeper relationships within the group during the program, but also often people come away saying, gosh, I've started to change how I run my meetings. I'm making more time for my one-to-ones and I listen more. And it's changed how people feel around the place.
Yeah.
So these are some of the things. And there's more. I don't want to talk so much at once.
Well, and you have some of those words that others have shared who've taken your program about what those impacts are. And you said it, there's a very important phrase you used, meeting yourself. It's not about stopping these difficult or unwanted feelings or thoughts or circumstances that are going to happen. It's how we work with them. And that idea of meeting yourself is not a yippee skippy pie in the sky thing. It's a very real and pragmatic thing of getting to know how you are in a given moment so that you can choose to respond better. And that is at the core of leadership. I wonder if you might say a little bit about some of the difficulties that are encountered that you've seen in sharing some of this, having an ethical framework for leading ethically. What
Mm-hmm.
are some of the resistance that you've encountered?
The main resistance is being vulnerable, because coming onto my program requires leaders to be vulnerable, to share some of their experiences as leaders. So in my program, each leader has an opportunity to share a particular or specific moment in their leadership that they have never shared before, never told before, have not worked through or processed yet, and to talk about it for 4 minutes and to have that reflected back. So that's the greatest challenge that leaders face, if you like, if they come on board, to be human, to let down the guard only as much as feels comfortable. It's a very safe space, my program. And what I've just said might seem like the biggest challenge at first. And this is the very thing that people find most valuable coming away from the program. Having experienced that, sharing their emotions of feeling fearful or anxious, inadequate, or whatever it might be, or sad, or in despair, or out of control. They experience that it actually isn't as dramatic as they think. That actually it makes them stronger because they come into relationship with themselves. They meet themselves where they are, as though they sometimes have met themselves or meet themselves for the first time. And wow. And there's a deeper connection they then have with themselves and come out more confident. And of course, they are seen more fully. And the connection to others that happen, and the feedback they get, and the reflecting back, and the courage that ignites energy and confidence, and sort of being more fully in the world.
And an opportunity in taking a program like yours is within this space where you get to be vulnerable, you get to be open, and that there's a sense of psychological safety there that, yes, you can be in this place where we're going to listen and really receive what you have to hear, is an opportunity that not all leaders get in their day-to-day workplace. So being able to do that really creates the conditions for being able to meet ourselves, whether or not we like that phrase, that's what is occurring, and learn from that experience. And so that everything underneath the surface of all the things that lead to those actions that can benefit from having it, that can take place. It's an incubator for that growing.
Yeah, very much so.
I'm wondering what else, Karen, you'd like to share with the viewers about ethical leadership, maybe something we haven't covered yet or something that you'd like to encourage them with.
Yeah, I think I'd like to say, to make it a little bit fuller, perhaps, I've sort of dipped into a few benefits and challenges. What people and leaders take away from my program, I find, is quite robust. It's a practical framework for leading ethically. And it has sort of 5 aspects or areas of practice, I like to call it. The first one is awareness of self and others. The second is attitudes, looking at one's attitudes, like kindness, compassion, non-judgment, acceptance, empathy, generosity, as in giving time, knowledge, support, help, not monetary generosity, authenticity, humility, what it means to be humble as a leader, to receive feedback and to make amends if necessary. And relationality. How am I in relationship with myself and others? And what do I notice about the relationship I have, depending on how I bring myself in as a leader? Do I include or exclude? Do I come to others with an open heart, or feeling hostile or closed down? So these inquiries take place in my program and between sessions. And then the 4th area of practice is values, the inner values. What is it? Sort of really, what is most dear to me, us? We talk a lot in the corporate world about vision, mission, values, and people are really bored of it at times, because it's often very tokenistic. It's not lived. People can't connect to it because it's not their values. On my program, we look at what most deeply matters. And that could be values that we experience at home, that we have at home, that we also share in the workplace, like kindness or empathy or patience, courage, these things. It's different for different people. Really spending some time drawing these out, the personal inner values, not what we think should be important to us as a leader. Yeah, what matters? These are often very, very human values that people share, and they are surprised. But of course, the values that as we said earlier, drive everything. Yeah, how we show up in the world, who we are as a person. And then the last area is learning. Can we be as leaders open and curious about learning? Can we be committed to learning, be curious, open, rather than committed to being right or closed down or self-centered? So these are the 5 areas that I always hope people practice throughout the program and come away with, so they can continue to practice in their day-to-day. So I that's my wish, that leaders come away and they have something robust to work with. And then I offer 2 leadership one-to-one coaching sessions to really follow up on how their practice has been going, what they've noticed. And each area of practice comes with questions for self-inquiry, self-reflection, to really increase self-awareness. Because one thing, as we know, you and I particularly in the field we work in, we can talk about all these things, but that doesn't change our mind and heart. We've got to practice. This is my own experience. Mindfulness meditation has changed how I am in the world, how I relate to myself, has changed everything. It's how I'm much more alive in my life. Yeah. So that's my wish, that ethical leadership can do for leaders.
You said something very important as part of that, is that for everyone, it's a little bit different. And I think that's one of the advantages to programs like yours, is that the person who takes it gets something unique to themselves out of it. It's an exploration of what their values are. It's not a, here are the values to which you must adhere. It's what are yours?
Yeah.
And that curiosity and that exploration, and as you said with mindfulness, that training, that growing, that practice of that is what then bubbles up into the thing that we may only see as actions and words. But it's all the rest of it that's going underneath, that you help people to notice and see what's there.
So it's not theory, I like to say. It's practice. I'm not offering any models of ethical leadership, because there's lots out there. This is the how do we do it in our day-to-day.
Yeah. Well, thank you. And for those who are watching today's episode, again, I will be posting links to Karen's website and the place where links are found. Our guest today, Karen Liebenguth, thank you so much for being here and for talking with us about ethical leadership. I really appreciate your time today.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure to be here.
Thank you for joining today's conversation, and much appreciate our guest teaching us a little bit more about what ethical leadership means and how it can show up in the workplace, and not just the workplace, but in our lives as well. And remember, every moment you have a choice. Just make it the best you can. Thanks, and I'll see you next time on Mindfulness Voyage.